Hello and good morning. It's Friday, the 22nd of February. We've all managed to scrape through another working week, and none of us have succumbed to the madness of the world that we all live in. So that's good news. Today we're going back to 1889, and we got a paper called The People, which is apparently a paper for all classes. So the way that I picked the year and the paper is completely random because I've got so many years and papers to choose from that I figured right from the start that if I was going to handpick them, I'd go mad because I'd always be looking for, the best one for that day, when there's always, good stories in every paper. So it's really much better just to have a sort of random, I get the paper and I just crack on with it. Otherwise, I would literally spend hours pouring through each paper. So although the purpose of Yesterday Today really is to look at the smaller stories which make up people's everyday lives, right? And sort of breeze over the larger events in history, because although, of course, they're big events and they're really important, I like, the everyday life aspect of the stories that we find, the things which created people's daily, the things they just did. Having said that, the 22nd of February, 1889, had this familiar story in the paper. The New Whitechapel Horror. There seems no room for doubting that either the infernal miscreant popularly called Jack the Ripper or some equally devilish imitator is at work again. The details of the horrible murder in Swallow Yard are identical throughout with those of the previous series of horrors, except in one particular. The body was not mutilated. But that one difference is fully explained by the interruption of the assassin before he had time to complete his hellish work. The unfortunate woman was decoyed just as the other victims were into a dark place and had her throat cut in exactly the same manner. In this instance, as in the others, there was no apparent motive for the crime. The victim belonging to a class who rarely have enough money to pay for a square meal. They are among the poorest of the poor, and it's clear, therefore, that the murderer has not plunder in his mind. Equally evident is it that the crime must have been both carefully planned and swiftly carried out. The assassin knew where to take the poor creature, and having got her to the shambles he had fixed upon, he used the knife so quickly and so dexterously that she had not time to emit a single shriek. So that story, I was bound to sort of stumble across a larger story at some point. But that one was the murder of Frances Coles, which happened in the week before, actually. I think it was the 13th. But this was being a weekend paper. They obviously reported on it then. And it was really big news at the time. Because later on, I think possibly by this point, a suspect who had been seen with her, James Sadler, he was actually caught and tried. And a lot of people thought that he could have possibly, at the time anyway, thought that he was, or, possibly Jack the Ripper. But he got off on the end in lack of evidence. But, these days, people are not quite as convinced as this paper that he was Jack the Ripper. And frankly, to be honest, he's kind of fallen out of the frame entirely now. And Frances Coles is never included, along with the canonical five, as being a Ripper victim or anything. But anyway, that was that story. It's quite interesting that eventually, it had to happen sooner or later that we were going to stumble across a story that's connected with something as large as that. And actually, the story runs on. That's the small report that I read there. But then there was actually a special whole section to the day's paper that was about 4 pages long, detailing sort of the crime, I suppose. So yeah, it was a really big deal. And the next story, I've got no idea the truth of this, but I really, really want it to be real. A robber's cave story. An extraordinary incident has just happened in the territory of the Chickasaw Nation to a body of police in their peregrinations through the Indian Territory. They stopped at a deserted ranch 22 miles north of Tishomingo to get their dinner when they stumbled across the hiding place of a gang of outlaws. The officers, in rummaging about the deserted house of the ranch, found in its rear an artificial cave in which a large quantity of stolen property had been secreted. Near the entrance stood the skeleton of a man with arms outstretched, evidently placed there to frighten people from penetrating the interior. Inside the cave, the police discovered a white man named William Henderson, who was chained in a recess and was almost in a state of starvation. He said he had been there for a month and had been well cared for until 5 days ago, when the robbers made their departure without releasing him. Since then, he had been without food or water. Henderson was in a very feeble state when he was discovered by the police and was unable to give any coherent account of his experiences, but it seems that he was hunting in the territory when he was captured, and that the robbers had kept him a prisoner with the view of demanding a ransom for his release. Now, like I said, I have no idea the truth of that story. I mean, if you look at it, it's a story about the American West in a British newspaper. It pretty much all it lacks is Rooster Cogburn barreling out of a bush on the back of a horse, yelling, "Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!" Right? I mean, you got the kind of the skeleton in the cave and a ranch that's deserted, full of treasure, in a fake cave out the back. I mean, maybe it's true. I don't know. I'm going to be doing an episode in this series that sort of deals with some of the kind of American West. A specific event, I think, but it's going to be really fascinating because for me, that's all I really hear is the kind of the fairy tale element of it. So I'm really interested in getting to that episode and sort of boring down into the kind of the reality of life, I guess, and things like that. So that'd be great. Anyway, we'll wrap things up this week with this peculiar little number. In the poetry column, we get just a few sentences. Owing to severe illness, KB has been entirely incapacitated for literary work this week. We are consequently unable to supply the usual poem by her gifted hand. The Wells Street Laundry, Camberwell, in the occupation of Mr. H. Fenimore, with its contents, has been totally destroyed by fire. It's just bizarre, out of place, run-on sentences. Those were the days, when you could just slap that right next to the... I mean, those two sentences just don't go together. Anyway, there's no main episode this weekend. It's obviously the off week. So I'm going to be putting in the hard miles to release it next week. So this weekend will be my kind of hardcore research weekend. So look forward to that. It's going to be a great one. It's going to be a local one to me. A huge mystery, and quite famous, but it happened in my hometown. Or a big part of it happened in my hometown. So, hopefully I can bring some insight to it that might be a little different. So look forward to that. Otherwise, if you want to find us on social media, we're Dark Histories pretty much everywhere. If you go to darkhistories.com, you can find everything you need there. If you'd like to support, we've got a Patreon. Again, just go to darkhistories.com. And that's enough of that. Have a fantastic Friday and a brilliant weekend. And I'll see you all on Monday. Take it easy.